Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to do a part 2 of recommending you books based on your cafe orders. And this time I wanted to get some of your actual cafe orders so that I can give you more personalized recommendations. And a few of you guys really came through and gave me a couple of your favorite coffee orders and cafe orders that I can recommend you books based off of. So without further ado, let's get into part 2 of recommending you books based on your cafe orders. All right, so starting off, we're gonna talk about 2 drinks that I did not get to feature in my last video, and they're both actually tea drinks, which is interesting because I would say like a decent amount, if not almost all of the drinks I'm gonna talk about. My computer's over there, that's why I'm looking over there, but all of those drinks are going to be tea drinks. So lots of tea drinks for you guys if you're not into coffee. Last video was mostly coffee related drinks, but this time it's a lot of teas. So the first drink I wanted to talk about is a London Fog, which from my understanding is a Earl Grey tea, and then sometimes there's like a vanilla or a lavender syrup added to it and steamed milk on top. When I make London Fogs for myself, I usually do a Earl Grey, about half of the cup of Earl Grey, and then I'll steam almond milk or oat milk and I'll pour that on top. No syrups or anything because I don't like mine sweet, but typically it's served with a lavender or vanilla syrup, probably vanilla most often. It's a delicious drink and it's something that I drink when I'm feeling a little bit more fancy. It's definitely a more floral drink and feels a little bit more elevated and a little bit more snobby than like a typical coffee drink. So in my opinion, someone who is drinking a London Fog is going to be looking for a book with very distinct characters, strong messages, and quality writing. And something that feels just a little bit more elevated than your typical book, so in my mind, more towards a literary fiction kind of book. So my recommendation for a London Fog would be Clara and the Sun by Kazu Ishiguro. This was my first Ishiguro book that I ever read. I read 2 books after that, Never Let Me Go and his short story. I guess that's more of a short story than a book, but his short story that was published by Faber. So I read those 2, but this was the one that really sparked my interest in Ishiguro. I think snobby is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. When you read literary fiction and you just feel a little bit better than everyone else, just a little bit, this book made me feel like that a little bit because it is a very well-written, well-developed book, and actually the experience of reading it itself felt very luxurious because the pages are super thick and it just feels like a very high quality book in the physical book itself. And then the writing is absolutely gorgeous and stunning. The character development is amazing. There's just so much to this book that makes it feel like a luxury to read, and that's what I kind of think a London Fog makes you feel like drinking it is a luxury kind of experience. If you don't know what Clara and the Sun is about, it's about a robot or an artificial friend named Clara who gets adopted, bought, whatever you want to call it, by a young girl named Josie. And it's basically Clara's job to learn about Josie, befriend her, become her companion. There are definitely some more sinister things lurking under the surface, but mostly it is a book about friendship and learning about each other and love and what it means to be human. There's just a lot of different interesting themes going on here, and it also does focus a lot on what makes an artificial intelligence being human, if they ever can be, and where's the line between human and robot, which is just a really interesting concept and something that I was never particularly interested in, or nothing I ever really thought about before I read this book. So it's definitely thought-provoking, it is literary, it's a unique story, and I think it would work really well if you're somebody who likes drinking London Fogs. All right, in my last video, I did not talk about herbal teas at all, and that is something that I feel like a lot of coffee shops or cafes incorporate. I drink them all the time, and I just didn't get to talk about it much in my last video. So for this video, I chose chamomile tea as my second drink. So someone who drinks chamomile tea, in my mind, is looking for something cozy, something relaxing, something comforting, and something that's not going to particularly rile them up or, you know, get them caffeinated or anything. They're looking for something to soothe them, comfort them, quiet them. And the kind of books that I associate with that are much more chill books, not something that's going to be super intense, not a thriller, not a mystery, nothing like that. Something that's going to be very cozy, something something like Sourdough by Robin Sloan would be perfect in my mind. This book is about a young woman named Lois who is working in a factory that makes robots, and she has a horrible diet. She feels kind of like crap all the time, and she stumbles across this restaurant that makes soup and sourdough bread. She becomes friends with the family, the family that runs the business, and when they actually have to move, they leave her some sourdough starter. And the starter kind of sparks this whole journey of her learning to make bread and find community and better herself overall. It's a very cozy book, and I think it would be wonderful if you're somebody who would order a chamomile tea at a coffee shop. Now this one is kind of funny because the title itself actually has coffee in it, and it is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. So this one is about a cafe where you can time travel if you sit in a certain seat in the cafe, and the one stipulation is that you have to drink all of your coffee before it gets cold, otherwise you will be stuck in the past or the future or wherever you travel to and will not be able to return to the present. So even though the focus of this book is on coffee, I think it would pair really, really well with chamomile tea because it is a very soothing, quiet book. I can just imagine you sitting in a cafe, reading this book, drinking some chamomile tea, being very chill. It's a little bit emotional, so maybe you need that comfort of the chamomile tea to soothe you as you're being emotional reading this book. And I think it would be a great pairing for chamomile tea, despite it being about coffee. And those are my two recommendations for chamomile tea. All right, transitioning into the orders that you guys told me about, we have one by Vita the Book Surfer, which is a raspberry latte. This was such an interesting order to me because at the coffee shop that I work at, we rarely get fruit flavors in coffee drinks. So I'm not sure if that's something that's more popular in other countries or just different areas of the US, but it's not something that I've ever made before. And I know that a lot of espressos can have floral and fruity notes to them, so it does kind of make sense to pair it with a fruit flavor. But it was very interesting to me, and it seems like a drink that is very playful, a little bit quirky, very fun, and a little bit unexpected, at least for me. So my recommendation to pair with a raspberry latte is Where the Wild Ladies Are by Ayako Matsuda. This is a short story collection that was translated from the Japanese, and it takes us through a compilation of ghost stories, kind of weird, haunted kind of stories that are reinterpretations of more traditional and old Japanese folk tales. When I first picked this up, I thought it was a book that was going to be very spooky and strange and unnerving. And while it sort of is those things, it's much more fun and playful and unexpected and strange than I ever expected it to be. I would definitely say this book has a lot of more feminist themes to it, and it definitely subverts some of the norms and expectations from the original folk tales. But it's also just really funny and weird, and like I said, very unexpected. You would not expect to be laughing and to find these situations that are so ridiculous in a book that is a series of ghost stories. So like I said, it's very unexpected, it's very quirky and weird, and I think it would pair very, very well if you're someone that orders a raspberry latte. All right, so next up we have an order by Quinn Reads, and it is nitro cold brew with sweet cream. Those two things are very, very conflicting in a way because nitro cold brew is the most like go, go, go caffeinated, strong thing you can think of. And sweet cream is very sweet and mild and mellow and kind of coats everything in a layer of sweetness. So my kind of pick for this is an attempt to kind of bridge those two things and represent both sides of that drink. And the way that I'm doing that is through a romance thriller. I think you guys can probably see what's coming, but it is Verity by Colleen Hoover. I just finished this not that long ago. I'm actually going to a book club about it tonight, which is very exciting. But this one basically follows a young writer named Lowen who is recruited to finish a series for a famous author, Verity, who recently got into a car accident and can't finish the series for herself. It's definitely very, very thrilling and mysterious. When I picked it up, I could barely put it down. I finished it in 2 days, which is very, very fast for me. I usually take quite a while to read books, but this one was a super, super fast read, and like I said about nitro cold brew, it's something that really is meant to like get you up and going. It's very strong, it's very bold, and that's how I feel about this book. It's gripping and thrilling and mysterious, But like I said, with the sweet cream coming in, this is also very much focused on a relationship and kind of a love triangle situation. And there is quite a bit of romance and sexual discussions and such in this book. So there's definitely that layer of like sweetness to it that is a little bit sinister, but it still has that romantic kind of feel to it. So it creates this sort of balance in dynamics that I feel like that drink, the nitro cold brew with sweet cream, kind of has. So this is my recommendation if you order a nitro cold brew with sweet cream. All right, next up we have a drink that was asked for a couple of times in my comments, but I'm specifically going to point out Amelia DuPont for asking for this drink, and it is a dirty chai latte. So a dirty chai usually is comprised of a chai concentrate, or however the chai is made, which is a black tea and a bunch of spices. It also has milk, whether that's cow's milk or plant milk or whatever, and then a shot of espresso. So in a way, a dirty chai is kind of the best of both worlds. You get the flavors of a spicy kind of tea, as well as a coffee drink. You get a little taste of everything, whether that be bitter and sweet and spicy. And in terms of books, my recommendation for the best of both worlds, or however you want to say that, is Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Balikaur Jaswal. So this is a book that follows a young woman named Nikki who is kind of feeling like she lacks purpose, she's not getting anywhere in her life, and she goes to the local Punjabi kind of community board and she finds an ad to teach a creative writing class. But she ends up not really teaching a creative writing class. She gets there and the woman who's hiring her kind of wanted her to just teach the Punjabi widows English, and she was not able to read the sign that she put up on the board well enough to know the difference. So there's kind of a miscommunication there, and in a weird turn of events, Nikki ends up teaching a class on writing erotic stories that the Punjabi widows are reading and writing and telling aloud, and it's hilarious. The way the widows talk about sex is so funny, and it's very unique in that we really don't get a lot of books that talk about sexuality from a older woman's perspective, because women this age are not particularly seen as people capable of sexual desires or feelings, and seeing that represented was super, super cool and a very unique perspective. And going hand in hand with that, there's also a lot of discussions in this book about the suppression of female sexuality, specifically for these older women in the society. But my reasoning for choosing this book is that it really just has a bit of everything. There is romance in it, there's comedy in it, there's a sort of thrilling twist at the end that I did not see coming. There's just a little bit of everything. It's sweet, it's spicy, it's bitter, there's a lot of sadness and things to work through in the family. There is a lot of social things that are discussed in the community, and there's just so many things at play for such a kind of brief novel, and it really does have a bit of everything. So if you're someone who orders a dirty chai latte at a cafe, I think you would really like this book. All right, let's talk about the bane of my existence, the pumpkin spice latte. So I got a comment by Margot Finch asking for recommendations based on a pumpkin spice latte, and I almost didn't do it, but I really wanted to for you guys because I felt like I had some good things to say and good books to recommend for you. Honestly, I really don't judge anybody for ordering this drink. It's just such a meme at this point, and like the idea of pumpkin spice everything that is so funny to me. And it really just is a meme drink at this point. So we kind of have to roll with that and talk about the books that are super popular, super talked about, books that have taken the internet by storm. So side note, this is not to say that these books are not good. I am not one to judge based on these books. These are books that I'm recommending to you because I enjoyed them. So I understand the popularity of these books. I understand the popularity of that drink. I get that they're popular because people love them and because they're good. But anyway, let's get into the recommendations. So my first recommendation for a pumpkin spice latte is Normal People by Sally Rooney. I don't think I have to super explain to you what this one is about, but generally it's about Marianne and Connell, and they're in high school and they sort of have this on-again, off-again relationship. And as they're growing up, they have to deal with the way that their relationship changes and evolves. And that's basically all the book is about. This is not a favorite of all time for me, but I did enjoy it, and I think it is a very popular book for a reason. There's a lot to love about this book. It just wasn't a book that I particularly loved. But again, It's popular for a reason. It is a very fun book to read. It's very emotional at times. It is very real and raw, and everybody seems to love Sally Rooney. So in my mind, this is the basic bitch equivalent of like a pumpkin spice latte in the book world. So if you enjoy pumpkin spice lattes and are maybe a tad basic, I think you would like Normal People if you haven't already read it, because honestly, most people have. And then my other recommendation would be The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This one is really just on here because it has become an internet sensation. It has taken the world by storm. It was published quite a while ago, I think like 2015 or something like that. But only in the past year did it like go crazy on the internet, that I remember anyway. And everyone read it and everyone was obsessed with it. And I was kind of part of that. Like, I loved this book. I posted about this book. I really, really enjoyed it. And I understand the hype. It's a retelling of the Iliad, and it focuses on the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus instead of on the actual Trojan War itself. It is a fantastic book. It is well written. I love the characters. It's sad. It is touching. It's romantic, it's just everything. But before it kind of blew up on the internet, I don't think it would have really made this part of the list. But because it blew up and because everyone knows about it and everybody read it, it does kind of have this ubiquitous kind of nature to it. And I think that really pairs well with a pumpkin spice latte because, again, it's kind of a meme, it's kind of a basic drink, everybody knows about it, and that's kind of how I feel about this book at this point. Though, I still really do love it and I do want to reread it, so I guess I'm participating in the basicness, but that's The Song of Achilles. And those are my recommendations for a pumpkin spice latte. All right, our next recommendation comes from a person that I don't know that I can really pronounce their screen name. It's Athen Vixen, I think. Athynvixen. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but they asked for a matcha latte, which is something that I am currently drinking. So I'm very familiar with the flavor profile and experience of drinking matcha lattes. So I believe the specific drink was an extra hot soy matcha latte, which is very different from what I get. I usually get an iced oat milk matcha latte or an iced almond milk matcha latte, depending on the coffee shop. But either way, usually matcha to me kind of feels the same regardless if it's hot or iced. And the flavors of matcha to me are very, very earthy. So I wanted to recommend some books that felt very grounded and earthy. So I have two kind of very tiny books for this, which is kind of funny how that worked out. But the first one is The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating by Elizabeth Tova Bailey. This is one that I've talked about recently because I just read it in February going into March. This one is basically about a woman with a chronic illness, which was during the time of this book kind of undiagnosable and untreatable. And while she's bedridden, her friend brings her a wild snail to watch and to keep her company. And it's really just about all of her thoughts on her chronic illness, the snail, how the snail kind of informs how she feels about her cramped space and the fact that she can't get around and all of those kind of things. There's some scientific stuff in this about the snail, there's some anecdotal stuff about the snail, and there's a lot of discussion of how her chronic illness informs her view of the world and how the snail informs her view of the world. It's just a very sweet, intriguing concept, and it's very, very well written and really, really fun to read, very fast-paced. And like I said, it's a very earthy feeling book, very grounded, and grounded in that it is related to the body, but also that it's related to nature and animals and what nature has to teach us. So I think if you like matcha lattes, you would definitely enjoy The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. And my other recommendation for a matcha latte is Wish Tree by Catherine Applegate. So this is kind of a funny story. When I picked this up, it was actually in the adult section of Barnes & Noble, but I began reading it and I saw that it was very, illustrated throughout and it felt like a children's book. Apparently it is a children's book and it was just shelved incorrectly. So this book is about a tree in a particular neighborhood that people hang wishes on like little scraps of paper, and it's about the community surrounding the tree. It's about the animals that live in the tree, and it's a very, very sweet, earthy book in that the main character is a tree itself. It's narrated from the tree's perspective, and it focuses on the animals and the community of animals that are living in the tree. So there's a lot about the intricacies of the animals' lives, and I love the perspective of having the tree be the narrator, so we get a lot of insight into how the tree feels about the community. There's a lot of wisdom that the tree has, and it's just a very sweet, fun children's book that feels very rooted, pun intended, and very earthy. So if you like matcha lattes, I think you would like both of these books. All right, and the final recommendation comes from the same person who recommended the matcha latte, and that is a turmeric latte. So when I think about a turmeric latte, I think about something that's very bright, it's colorful, and it's also a healthy drink. It's something that is delicious, but is also very, very healthful and has a lot of healing properties and anti-inflammatory properties and things like that. So for me, I kind of connected the health benefits of a turmeric latte to the health benefits of reading, which in my mind kind of translated to reading nonfiction. But a turmeric latte is also bright and colorful and happy and a little bit different. So to me, that kind of translates to nonfiction that is going to feed your brain and make you healthier, however you want to say that. But it's also something that is very unique and colorful and bright. So it's not boring nonfiction. It's not stereotypical nonfiction. It's nonfiction with a little twist, a little color, a little added flair. So I actually have 3 recommendations for this. The first one is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. I've talked about this one many, many times. This one is about a bunch of questions that Caitlin Doughty has gotten from kids. She's a mortician, so kids ask her questions about death. It's not necessarily a children's book, but the basis of all of these questions came from children or things that a child might ask about death. And she kind of breaks them down scientifically and makes them very easily digestible. So it's factual, it is definitely informative, and has a lot to learn from this book. So it's definitely going to feed your brain, but it's also very fun. I flew through this book. It was super unique and interesting. I've never read a nonfiction book like this, and it was definitely colorful, unique, interesting, and a little bit quirky. So that's my first recommendation for a turmeric latte. My next recommendation is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. So this is John Green's first nonfiction, and it is an essay collection, which is basically him reviewing different things in the world. So really, really small things to really big things. He talks about the pandemic. He talks about Mario Kart and soda and like random little things, and then things as big as the internet, sunsets, velociraptors. Like there's just a huge variety of different things that he talks about. And it's a very weird kind of quirky nonfiction, but it's very informative in that there's a lot of little tidbits and things that he adds that are very brain feeding. You learn a lot from it, but it's also just very sweet and feel good, and is just a very, very unique and interesting nonfiction. So I think this would work really, really well if you order a turmeric latte. And then my final recommendation I don't have a physical copy of, but it is Cultish by Amanda Montell. So this book to me is the epitome of this kind of prompt. It is a very fact-based nonfiction book in that it talks about the language of cults and how we use language in our culture to kind of draw people into communities and how those communities can be a little bit cultish. So it's very fact-based and all of that, but it's also incredibly fun and interesting. And I think I listened to the audiobook in like a day because it just really captured my attention and I could not put it down. It's fast-paced, it's interesting, it's relatable. There's a lot of things in this that are very pop culture related and things that we can connect to very easily, things that we're just fascinated to find out more about, because honestly, a lot of the things that Amanda Montell talks about are things that we can all kind of see in ourselves, which makes it just fascinating to read this book. So like I said, it is a very informative book, but also very, very fun. So those are my recommendations if you order a turmeric latte at a cafe. All right, that concludes my second round of recommending you books based on your cafe orders. If I missed anybody's order, let me know. And if you have a different order that you want me to cover in potentially another video, also let me know. I'm not sure how many of these I'm going to do, but depending on how many orders I get in the comments, if you guys are interested in seeing this, I'll definitely do a part 3. So let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.